This morning on Media and Society, for the first time in history, the SA Jewish Report has become the first member in 20 years to be expelled from the Press Council of South Africa. We discuss the role of the media and films in times of war and conflict. We also take you to Kenya and look at the role of social media during political campaigns. Well, good morning and welcome to Media and Society on SABC News, independent and impartial. My name is Naledi Muleo. Now, this is where we look at the intersection between media and audiences. And of course, this show is not complete without your say. So connect with us via our social media channels and share your views and concerns about how the media works and what we feed you. Hashtag media, SABC Media and Society rather, on Twitter, or give us a call on the number 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6842. Well, let's get into our discussion for today. Kicking off the morning, the SA Jewish Report has been expelled by the South African Press Council. Now, it's the first time in the history of the Press Council that a member has been expelled. The expulsion follows the Jewish Report's refusal of retracting their refusal to apologize over a cartoon. Now remember to give us a call on the number 011-714-6841 or 011-714-6842. On Twitter, use SABC Media and Society to talk to us a little bit more about the oldest serving member of the Press Council of South Africa. We are now joined by Dade Joe Tlholwe, and we're also joined by a former SA Jewish Report board member, Professor Anton Harber. We invited the SA Jewish Report, of course, but they were unable to join us this morning. But let's speak to our guests. Good morning to you, Dade Tlholwe and Professor Harber. We really do appreciate you giving us your time. This is an important discussion, and I think that this is one that certainly is going to set a precedent for how media houses operate moving forward and how organizations that hold them accountable look at their work. But Prof. Harber, I want to start with you. This issue goes all the way back to 2020 when BDS essentially showed a cartoon that later on was described as anti-Semitic. Can we go back to 2020 and what you thought when you looked at that cartoon and how that discussion has played out over the past 2 years?
Certainly. Let me just say up front, though, that you introduced me as a former member of the Jewish Report board. A long time ago, I was a member of that board, but I want to make it clear I do not speak for them and I do not represent them. I give an independent view.
Right.
You know, my difficulty with this is that cartoon evokes a long history of anti-Semitic cartoons. And so it was going to evoke very strong feelings in the Jewish community as reflected in Jewish Report. So they ran the cartoon saying that BDS had used it in relation to a dispute at Clover Dairies, and its link to Israel and the occupied territories, and said that that it showed that the BDS was anti-Semitic. This was disputed by the BDS and by the cartoonist, and they complained. The Press Council, while acknowledging that the cartoon could be anti-Semitic, purely went on the question of whether it was presented as opinion or fact, because the press rules, the Press Council rules, the Code of Ethics, is very clear that you have to separate out opinion and fact.
Right.
And they said the Jewish the Jewish Report had presented this as fact where it was opinion. And therefore, they found against and asked them to correct and apologize to BDS. Now, the situation between BDS and Jewish Report and the Jewish community is a difficult one. And the Jewish Report found itself unable to apologize to BDS. They appealed against the judgment. I'm mystified really as to why there wasn't a hearing, because it seems to me that in such a dispute you should lean over backwards to try and find a solution, because the outcome at the end of the day, I think, is unfortunate for everyone. Jewish Report is no longer a member of the Press Council, which is not a good thing. The Press Council loses jurisdiction over it, which is not a good thing. I only wish another solution could be found that fell short of a parting of ways in this method.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that process that led to the parting of ways, but thank you so much for really laying the groundwork there. And the cartoon that Professor Harbour is talking about, just to give you a bit of a context here, is an image of an obese white man stuffing his face with money. And this is essentially a poster or an image that was put together where the message by BDS was to stop supporting a certain dairy company that I know we all know about because we followed the developments there in that very popular dairy company. Ndata Tolwe, if I bring you in here, BDS brought the complaint to the Press Council. Had they not done so, would the Press Council have actually looked into this issue?
No, the Press Council doesn't go out looking for faults in the media. We depend on readers, listeners, viewers sending in their complaints to the Press Council. So we don't proactively go out looking for faults. So we wouldn't have handled it unless there was a complaint, and there was a complaint in this instance.
And perhaps we need to clarify the position of the Press Council here and ask how much of this actually has to do with the religious politics that are in place here, or is it really just about what Professor Harbour mentioned, is that distinction between opinion and fact? I mean, where does the Press Council sit with regards to that?
I think in his ruling, Johan Retief, who was the acting ombudsman at the time, said it very clearly that the Jewish Report had the right to hold the opinion it had. The only thing wrong was that it put its opinion as fact instead of saying this is our opinion. And the code is very clear. You've got to mark comment separately from factual reporting. So it was a technical offense, if you might call it that. And the Press Council has always insisted that this is a position. We are not trying to judge the Jewish Report on its opinion. That is not the issue here.
Professor Harbour, the Jewish Report itself says that they had attempted to pull themselves out of the Press Council themselves before the expulsion, and you say there could have been a better way of handling it. But it seems that the difficulty in actually finding a solution here started a very long time ago. What do you say to someone who says, why could they not just apologize or sit down with BDS and have that conversation?
Yes, one wishes that it could have been thrashed out around the table. And had they allowed for a hearing, I think that would have opened up that possibility. Let me say that there's this oddity whereby the Jewish Report apparently resigned from the Press Council, but there's a 3-year delay in a resignation process, quite oddly. And therefore, after they'd resigned, they were expelled. So, you know, there are many technical oddities in this. But I think what's important to say is that, of course, there is a background here to a conflict that is unpleasant and ugly, and I wish we could put it aside and thrash out a solution to it. Because, as I say, I don't think the outcome is to anyone's advantage. It's an unfortunate outcome, and it would be best if it could be avoided.
Ndate Tolwe, the Jewish report itself says that the order by the press council that the Jewish report apologized to BDS for calling the cartoon anti-Semitic. According to them, they say that you effectively pushed them out of the council. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what you say to that. That this is what they said, that you effectively pushed them out. Respond to that. And then what does this mean when we have a publication that is not part of an important council, such as the Press Council, that was essentially adopted as media oversight that is not in government's hands?
I think we should not skim over this issue. The issue is that the Press Council has got a very specific constitution. And the constitution says every publication that joins the Press Council has to follow the rulings of the Press Council, has to obey the rulings of the Press Council. If we were to leave it to the whim of any publication to decide whether to publish or not, the whole system would collapse. It's spelled out in black and white in our constitution, in the ethical code of the Press Council. Now, if you say it should have been discussed around the table, Professor, does it mean you are suggesting that we should ignore our grounding documents? Because once we let one publication get away with it, we've lost the system completely.
No, you have to follow your rules and processes. I don't deny that. But these things, I don't think that precludes an attempt to find a solution. One of the realities we also need to face up to is that one of the major newspaper groups has gone rogue and is not in the Press Council in a way that's doing damage to the whole industry. And one of the factors is that, we need everyone in the Press Council. And I'm not saying at all costs, but we have to face up to the reality that losing members of the Press Council, as happened with independent newspapers, undermines the whole system, and I think is most unfortunate.
Yeah, I'll let you come in there, Ndate Tolwe. I apologize. We need to take a break very soon, but I really want to, when we come back, start to expand the conversation that the two of you really are starting to bring up about who's part of the Press Council and who is it, what the role of the Press Council really is if you've got some publications that are still speaking to the public but are not actually under the umbrella of the council. Does that take away the teeth of the council itself, and what regulatory systems then do we need to put in place? But let's take a short break. We're going to continue this discussion around the expulsion of the Jewish report, the SA Jewish report, from the Press Council of South Africa when we return. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Media and Society. My name is Naledi Muleo. Thank you so much for being with us. Remember, we are taking your calls on the discussion that we're having this morning, and that is around the SA Jewish report having been expelled from the South African Press Council. This is the first time in the history of the Press Council that a member has been expelled. But what does this really mean for media oversight in the country? Right, and what does it mean when you have a publication that is still able to reach its consumers, but is not being regulated or under the umbrella of the council? Share your thoughts. Give us a call on 011-714-6841, and perhaps you have your thoughts on that particular cartoon itself and how the Jewish Report handled the matter and how the Press Council handled the matter as well, asking the Jewish Report to apologize for calling the cartoon anti-Semitic. 0117146841 to give us a call. Seatal is on the line this morning. Seatal, I'm not sure where you are, but good morning and thank you for calling. Seatal, are you there? Seatal? Okay, Seatal I see is on the line but isn't saying anything, so just try again, but you can also be part of that conversation. 0117146841. Prof, I'm gonna bring that question to you that I essentially just asked to the audiences. The implications really of having publications that are not under the umbrella of a body such as the council, because at the end of the day, the consumer of our media is impacted by whatever is communicated by these media houses, and that is who needs to be protected.
Yes, I agree. I think the Press Council is a very important body because it's a channel for citizens in general to address problems in the media and in news media and journalism, short of going to court, which is a long and expensive process. And it enables the setting of standards in the industry, which are extremely important. So the Press Council is an important body. And, perhaps I should say that when I say the outcome is unfortunate, the Jewish Report asked my opinion before they resigned from the Press Council, and I was clear to them that they should not resign. So it was certainly my view that they shouldn't have resigned because I believe one has to support the system of self-regulation as an essential part of ensuring the professionalism and the ethical basis on which journalism has to operate.
Yeah, let's try that caller again. Seatal in Johannesburg. Seatal, good morning. Seatal, are you still Seatal in Johannesburg? Are you there? All right, Seatal, I tried. I apologize. I really tried. But you can be part of the conversation as well. 011-714-6841. Ndade Tlole, that same question to you. The concerns around not having publications as part of the council, what that means for the audiences? Because essentially, so many of us are at home watching right now when we're thinking, well, what does it matter to us that the Jewish Report is not part of the council?
I think this goes to the heart of our democracy. Our democracy is reliant on people governing themselves, people managing their own lives. Now, as far as the media is concerned, the government can't come in and tell publications what to publish or what not to publish. So what the media did is they came together and said, let us have standards that we will maintain, that will improve our relationship with our readers, with our viewers, with our listeners. And so you had the Press Council emerging, you had the BCCSA emerging. These are voluntary organizations established by the publications themselves to say, how do we keep standards high? So if one publication decides to walk away from this collective, it is entirely up to them to do that. It is not the duty of the Press Council to say, no, you can't go. They are free to go. But the point is, the readers who use that medium do so voluntarily too. Nobody forces them to buy that publication. So it's entirely up to the individual to choose the publication that represents what he thinks is good journalism.
I wonder if South Africans are able to really tell the difference all the time. I think, we receive what we receive, and I wonder if we're able to disseminate between what is good journalism and what isn't. Perhaps you can give us a call and share your thoughts on that one. Do South Africans know the difference between good journalism and bad journalism? 0117146841. Dr. Tlholo, I want to stay with you, because if we expand the discussion a little bit more and we actually talk about opinion pieces in South Africa, and let's admit that South Africa is a hot political pot. Opinion pieces as a whole have stirred that pot a lot. Is there some sort of guidelines on how opinion pieces really should be handled?
I think the courts have set the standards for that. For example, the concept of protected comment, that is in the press code, emanated from the courts, where they said comment is protected. Even if it's wrong opinion, it is protected by the law. But it has to be clearly defined as opinion. That stems from what the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court have said. So every publication has got its own opinion on current affairs, on things that are happening, and they are entitled to those opinions, but they are clearly marked as comment as opposed to factual stories that say this happened yesterday at such and such a place. And that distinction is clearly explained in the press code that we have.
I'm fearing that that we're being very clinical in this discussion, because at the end of the day, and I say this again, publications speak to the public. So when we talk about opinion pieces, and I'm not talking about this opinion piece particularly by the Jewish Report, I'm talking about all publications, and we see this a lot, and we certainly are seeing more and more of it as political storms brew in the country. One wonders what that impact of those political opinion pieces really have on the public. Prof. Harbour, this is what essentially I'm trying to get to, is at what point do we curtail opinion in the news and current affairs space to protect clean journalism and to protect the audiences?
Well, look, opinion is journalism too. What the Press Council is looking for is a clear distinction. This is fact and this is opinion. Now, I think we would all know that you can't always be absolutely clear. That distinction is not always obvious. But certainly it points to a need to differentiate in the presentation of news between what is clearly fact and what is clearly opinion. And it's an important distinction. It's increasingly blurry in our media. I've written a piece recently that says, I wish we had more reportage, more fact-based reporting and less opinion. It doesn't mean opinion isn't important. It's an important part of our journalistic package. But the Press Council and the ethical rules are looking for wherever possible to make it clear when something is an opinion. You know, it's a technical point here. And Joe is quite right that this comes down to a technical issue. But what lies behind it is a cartoon that would evoke real anxiety and concern in the Jewish community. And that's really what lies behind the response you're getting. And I only wish that that BDS and the press councils could I only hope that they see the history behind this cartoon and the reason such images evoke such strong concern and fear in the Jewish community.
All right, thanks, Prof. Let's take some calls. Zoe is on the line. Zoe, good morning to you. Zoe, are you there? I hope we don't have trouble with our lines this morning. Zoe, good morning to you. Are you there? Okay, she's hung up. Some trouble with our lines today. Let's talk a little bit about what we do moving forward, right? We've seen cartoons rile South Africans up many times. This isn't the first time that we've seen it. Ndate Tlholwe, how do we handle these? Cartoons have divided us before, political cartoons particularly. Are we looking closely at those enough in the country?
We should accept what the Constitution says. Everybody has freedom of expression. We're allowed to say what we believe, what we think, what we love, what we hate. That is guaranteed in the Constitution. So we can't limit what people can say or can't say. But what the Press Council does is it says, yes, we have this freedom, but we should use it responsibly as the media. And that's why we set the standards that we have set. We have said there are facts, there's opinion, there's protected comment, all these categories. There are certain limits that the law has put, and we are going to abide by those limits.
Yeah. Prof.
So we can't say it's a new thing that cartoons are emerging now. It's always been part of the media. Opinion is part of the media. And people generally use the media that they agree with. That's the irony of this whole debate.
Very interesting. Prof, any closing thoughts from you?
No, I think I've said what needs to be said. I absolutely agree that people's freedom to differ, to argue, to thrash these things out must be respected in line with our Constitution. Cartoonists have more space to comment than in straight news, and that's a good thing. Cartoonists must be given the space to express strong views. But obviously we've had before a concern where cartoonists' depiction of people is seen as problematic and racist, and that's caused a controversy. And it's caused a controversy here. But I think we all agree that we would prefer all South African publications and journalists to be in the Press Council. And that is really what we need to try and ensure happens.
Yeah, well, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate the time of our guests there. Ndate Tlholwe of the Press Council of South Africa and former board member of the SA Jewish Report, Professor Anton Harber. And of course, we did invite the SA Jewish Report itself to join us, and they told us that they were unable to make it. You're watching Media and Society. Let's take a short break. We're back in a moment. Well, you are still watching Media and Society. Thank you so much for being with us. Remember, you can be part of the conversation. Give us a call on 011-714-6841 or on Twitter. Use the hashtag SABC Media and Society. Well, this is our next discussion this morning. The BBC has condemned Russia's refusal to renew a visa of a British journalist. Now, Russia's state radio station is reported to have said that this is in response to the UK's delays in issuing visas to Russia's journalists. This happens as the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine continues. So the West has continuously criticized Russia for the conflict, but joining us to talk about the link between the media and state, particularly in times of war and conflict. And this is going to be a story that I think is going to have our attention for a long time. We are now joined by Professor Shepard Mbofu from the University of Limpopo, and to help us discuss how the media frames countries in war, movies as well as TV dramas, is creative producer and writer Mahlohonolo Manchester Mahaba. Mahlohonolo, thank you so much for joining us. A good morning to you.
Thank you so much for having me, Naledi.
Good to have you with us. Prof, welcome back. I think you're home now at Media and Society, it seems.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone, and good morning to your viewers. And happy Father's Day to all the dates out there.
Of course. And I'll take care of that at the end of the show. I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding us. Shepard, before we actually get into the discussion around this particular story coming out of Russia, I want to actually just go back a little bit and say, you know, about 20 years ago, we really started hearing the term embedded journalism for the very first time. This is when America invaded Iraq. So tell us a little bit about what they were describing when they talked about embedded journalists. I don't know if South Africans actually know what that means.
So this is the 2003 Iraq war, where America goes to war in Iraq. And you were journalists attached to the military units that were involved in the armed conflict there. So basically, the journalists were reporting from the perspective of the American soldiers. And initially, actually, soldiers were censoring some information that the journalists were churning out to the public. So in that way, they became sort of part of the military and part of the ideological structure of the US, and they were working together with the military and not dispassionately reporting events or reporting what was going on in the war front, but they were guided by the military. And in some cases, some journalists were actually kicked out of the embedment, as it were, because they reported certain things that were not deemed palatable to the military.
Yeah, you know, when we start talking about the role of media in being impartial, one wonders where that impartiality stops, right? So let me tell you why I bring that up. In times of war, Prof, it is most likely that you're going to see media houses from a particular country speaking for that country, right?
Yes, definitely. So it's all about national identities and attachments that, and to a certain extent, loyalty, not patriotism. Loyalty and patriotism are totally different. And loyalties to the system actually would lead journalists in reporting news or reporting events in a certain biased way that rallies behind their national flags, rather than telling the truth, rather than being objective, fair, and ethical.
This is actually what I wanted to get to. My next question was, is that ethical?
Definitely it's not. It's not. The journalists, they swear to their oath of objectivity, of being ethical and the like. But once you are embedded, you are told how to report certain news stories. Once you are loyal to your country, you cease to see things objectively, and therefore you are likely to going to report from an emotional sort of standpoint, as it were. So at the end of the day, embedded journalism is not ethical, and neither is loyal journalism ethical.
Yeah. So obviously we've got Professor Shepard here to talk to us about, you know, the non-fictional media side of things. And then when we get into movies and drama series, and we go back to Hollywood, Nollywood, South Africa wood, all of it, do we see the same thing? Where there's a narrative that's told by a particular grouping, and because they're telling the story, they're going to tell it the way they want to. I mean, I look at how when you watch a spy movie, for instance, in Hollywood, a lot of the time it's a Russian spy.
It's actually so interesting, and I'll use an example later on just to kind of bring the topic together. But you know, one of the things famous documentary filmmaker Patricio Guzman said, you know, country without documentaries is like a family without albums. So we understand the importance of what documentaries and even fictional TV, what we see in our television means, you know, and we know that it is a pedagogical tool. It teaches society, you know, and influences them. I mean, something as small as how we learned after a date, to kiss and to offer somebody a beverage to come inside the house. That's something that, we saw on television in Hollywood, and then it became a part of who we are. But when you think about just the role of, representing film and representing characters within the landscape of war or conflict, you must look at how we're framing the perpetrator, how we're framing innocence. What does it mean? What is the framing of that subject? And also as a filmmaker, a documentary maker, what is your positionality? Do you ask yourself the questions? Do you hold yourself accountable? Are you showing a balanced view? And then back to Hollywood, Hollywood actually even uses, it's like a yellow saturated tone. When they film in places like Mexico or South Asia or places of war.
Is that to make it look dusty?
Yeah, to make it look dusty, and it's almost like they're coming in to save, and sometimes it's even the
And you say that's intentional?
It's intentional. It's actually called, I forgot what the name is, but we call it a Mexican filter, because it's very yellow saturated undertones. Grainy, especially to create that kind of like warm, dry climate and poverty as well. So that when the American hero then goes into the space, it's like, oh my gosh, look at these poor people. He's there to save everyone. And also it frames them as heroes. And what the framing of innocence is so important, because once in a time of strife, we're framing particular subjects only from an innocent point of view, maybe if they're not, it allows in the future justification for violence if something then happens to them. So it creates an ahistorical imagination of a time and a period, because all we know is how a particular group of people have been framed as the innocent, as the heroes, the people that save us, the superpowers. So I think it's layered, and I'm bringing in a bit of film and documentary, but yeah, I think it wherever you think about representation, it's so important to find out, how are we presenting and representing the subjects in a particular matter, especially in a time of conflict. Who is the innocent? Who is the victim?
Yeah.
Because victimhood then denotes innocence. Who is the perpetrator?
Yeah, and then I'm also thinking about, especially in the world of films and fiction, right? One of the things that I think, Prof, what we can agree is that not everybody is interested in watching the news all the time, but everybody watches a film. Everybody watches a movie, and some of these machines are very big machines that we're talking about that are able to access minds. And a lot of the power goes to who has the biggest microphone, the biggest reach.
Absolutely. There was a film actually called The Act of Killing by a documentary filmmaker called Joshua Oppenheimer. It actually won an Oscar, I think it was about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I might be wrong in the timing. This was framing perpetrators of what at the time was not termed a genocide in Indonesia. So he went in to film, because they didn't term it a genocide, so he went and filmed the perpetrators of the violent attacks to say, how would you have done it if this was indeed an act of genocide that was happening in your country? And the sentiment and how it portrayed the country was like it just sent waves around the world. There was so much controversy around the film that actually he chose to create another film called The Look of Silence as a response to his own film, The Act of Killing, which then framed the conversation about this genocide, not genocide being termed, and then us seeing just what it meant to the people who were on the receiving end. So in that particular film, he centered the story on a young optometrist who had lost a brother in the supposed genocide, non-genocide, and then we were watching him create spectacles and help the perpetrators who were partly responsible for his brother's death in trying to see. So kind of like that look of silence, that metaphor. So he was just kind of framing it from the victim side of view, because he'd already shown the perpetrator's point of view, and it just made them seem so powerful, and it was like a state machinery, and I think he also felt a sense of guilt.
That's interesting. I wonder, though, if it's possible for us to get that ethical storytelling that we're talking about, right? So I'm saying it's necessary. Prof and Bof were essentially saying we need ethical storytelling in the world of news and current affairs, in the world of filmmaking as well. But is it actually possible? And this is what I'm talking about, is do you actually have reporters that have been able to cross that line and say, as a Russian journalist, I'm going to tell a story that is not pro-Russia? And where do you start to see those examples taking place, not just in that war, but across the board generally, where nationalism is not part of the story that I tell?
Yeah, so in Russia, we saw a few journalists actually quitting working for the Russian media because they couldn't continue telling lies about what was happening between Russia and Ukraine. And definitely we've seen it across the globe. And we can say that in America, some news media woke up late for the party when after the Iraq invasion, everyone realized there were no weapons of mass destruction, and then some news media actually started coming up and criticizing the government for its failures in terms of finding proper and fuller information before the invasion. And some were actually claiming to have been misled by the government, being told that there were weapons of mass destruction. And certainly most of the news media believed and ran with the story that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. But at the end of the day, journalism is all about being suspicious about your sources of information, suspicious about the government until you prove them right. And news media sort of fails in many different aspects, especially where there are heightened levels of nationalism and emotional nationalism attached to that. So they are not likely going to be suspicious of the government.
Just one more.
They're going to be alarmist if given anything.
Right. That point is made. Quickly, Prof, I need to bring this in because I'm running out of time. Do we have oversight? You know, earlier I was speaking to the Press Council, the South African Press Council, and I'm wondering if there's, you know, enough of that oversight being done on a global scale, particularly in times of conflict.
Definitely there isn't. And in any case, journalism is not legally controlled to an extent that somebody can be taken to the International Criminal Court for poor, wrong reportage or misinformed reportage or to a court of law. It's only ethics that guide people and then guide journalists, and this can easily be broken. And therefore, the oversight is not as stringent as one would expect it to be in other areas and spaces of life.
Yeah, Prof, thank you so much for your time. Before I let you go, Matlonolo, the role then of media in doing, I mean, do we have those same examples here at home where we're seeing stories being told from a particular perspective that drive a certain narrative? Do we have that issue here at home?
I don't know, actually. I haven't really gone so much into looking. Yeah, I don't know, actually. I'd have to come back to you on that one.
And I'm talking perhaps where we're seeing films and dramas are driving particular stereotypes in the country, when we bring it back home.
Yes, I think definitely stereotypes is something we see across the board. And obviously as filmmakers, sometimes it's not only just how we represent people, but it's also the language and how we term people. I think we also, in our young democracy, we also have the responsibility of creating that level of edutainment. It's not enough just to create the drama, but even when something is happening, we do show what is the positive sentiment to offset what we're showing negatively. So I think the work of representation is not only just the visual representation, but also the language and the people that you bring into a room, because they allow the story to be three-dimensional, so that you don't write always from one perspective, or you're telling the story of others, because we do know that there isn't something like there's what is it called, the unpreferably unheard. People are just not silenced, they're unpreferably unheard. And it all sometimes comes down to who's paying for it, you know. So if
who's
you have
got the money,
who's got the money, and they will lead you in that particular way. But we hope that we can be ethical and tell the stories and represent the people well.
Here's hoping, and we'll keep talking about it so that we start seeing more and more of that ethical storytelling. Thank you so much to Matlonolo Manchester Mahapa, who is a creative producer and writer. Thanks as well to Professor Shepherd Mpofu from the University of Limpopo. So let's move on. Research shows that social media is amplifying hate speech, especially because of the anonymity of social media platforms where one can hide behind the keyboard and then say anything. In Kenya, where political campaigns have reached fever pitch ahead of the general elections in August, social media platforms are rife with hate, incitement to violence, and all manner of falsehoods as politicians try to outdo each other in search of votes. SABC News correspondent Sarah Kimani spoke to various people to understand the role of social media in political campaigns, but also in spreading hate. Let's take a look.
From his mobile phone, digital media strategist Dennis Itumbi monitors a political rally presided over by Deputy President William Ruto hundreds of kilometers away in Kisii County. He then takes instructions to social media teams on the ground.
You have anything you want to say?
No. Once we are on the campaign trail.
Yes.
Still hunting for votes.
Any challenges?
On another side of the city, another social media strategist is tapping on his phone, crafting campaign messages on behalf of his 3 clients, all of them candidates in this year's election. In Kenya, political campaigns have evolved from rallies to the digital space, and any candidate will ignore social media at his own peril.
That's the battleground, yes. It's everything now.
Absolutely at the fulcrum, at the heart. For the Deputy President's campaign in Kenya this time specifically, everything.
Social media has opened up space for politicians to engage directly with potential voters, and unlike traditional and legacy media, it is cheaper.
In the past, you had to speak to the media in a press conference for media to interpret and tell the people what you're saying. Now we are avoiding that party called the media and speaking directly to that person without an interpretation and within our time.
Data from the Communications Authority of Kenya indicates that by September last year, out of the 64 million mobile phone subscriptions, 59 million of them had access to the internet. This, the greatest attraction for politicians.
This time around, social media is the main thing. Like, you need it to win some political seats, not just groundwork.
We think this campaign will be decided on video. In the 2013 campaign, social media was relatively new. So at that point, text was everything. The update on Facebook, the tweet was everything. In 2017, Instagram had just gotten in and it was getting some traction, but still it was not the main thing. This election, WhatsApp, Instagram has made Facebook and Twitter to be about short clips and video.
And herein lies the problem. According to research conducted by the Mozilla Foundation, online spaces have been used to spread political hate, propaganda, and misinformation in Kenya.
Our politics has always been poisonous and full of very incendiary rhetoric, right? So one of the things that we have seen is that where our politics has gone, a certain kind of rhetoric has also followed. And that involves now the hate speech and incitement that we have found to have been proliferating on the platforms.
In its latest research, the foundation found out that TikTok had become a tool for spreading political disinformation with little scrutiny.
TikTok would like people to think that it's a lip-syncing and dancing application, where people go there to have fun and all that kind of stuff. I would argue that things have changed. The application is not what it used to be, and a lot of the same ills and problems that we have seen with other platforms are inevitably going to creep up on the platform itself, and I would actually dare think that it could end up being worse, primarily because of how that application is structured.
This research follows similar ones on the role of Twitter and Facebook in spreading disinformation in the country during previous political cycles.
When I look at the social media and big tech platforms in general, what we see being a really big problem is something that we call context breakdown, which is that a lot of these companies, simply because they are, except TikTok, which is based in China, they're all, West Coast American companies with this huge global footprint, and they have absolutely no way of being able to catch up to the context of all of these countries that they are in.
TikTok has since removed the videos. The communications team, in a response to SABC, said it is committed to safeguarding its integrity during Kenya's elections. Social media is now a fertile ground to spread hate, consolidate power, and neutralize public outcry, according to research. The two digital media strategists we interviewed agreed.
There is a very serious increase on fake news, not even misinformation, on fake news.
I get a lot of inboxes, a lot of abuses, people telling you, we'll beat you up.
And while Kenya says it is clamping on hate and cyberbullying online,
those who would like to exercise their freedoms in expression, in association, in supporting their preferred candidates and individuals will do so while taking into consideration the welfare of the whole of society. No amount of insults, as I've said before, no amount of criticism of us in the executive branch of government will tempt us enough to resort to retrogressive acts of interfering with freedoms like shutting the internet or, clawing back on freedoms we have acquired through the Constitution and through the law.
Madung believes the ball still lies in the court of the big tech companies to publicly commit to fighting misinformation, disinformation and hate on their platforms in Kenya and indeed across Africa. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, Kenya.
And that's it from myself and the rest of the media and society team. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be with you again next week, Sunday. Have yourselves a blessed Sunday. And finally, before I let you go, happy Father's Day to our fathers, our uncles, our grandfathers, those that lead, protect all of us. Have yourselves a great Sunday.